What's up, guys? Thanks so much for stopping by the channel again. Today we have another in our Hail Caesar series of faction reviews for you. So as you can see from the picture and description here, we're talking about the Numidians today, guys. So a really fun list in its own right. So if you're not quite sure who these guys were, take a look at like Berbers, Mauritania, the Jugurthine War, and Juba of Numidia specifically. That'll get you started there. So let's take a look at what the list requires here. So it's got a core component here of infantry being at least a quarter of the list, and again, not counting skirmishers. Of that, up to a quarter of the non-skirmishing infantry units can be medium or heavy, so that'll play out in just a second. Cavalry could be up to 50, so really you could have a 50-50 mix in the list, but the Numidians do bring in an extra little bit of a wrinkle for you, and the fact that you can also have up to 20% of your list be elephants, so 1 in 5 there. There is a guard cavalry unit that is available that does have to be part of the general's division, but other than that, that's something you could do there. Interestingly, too, as well, though, skirmishers per division, an interesting one there. So different than normal. Divisions may contain up to as many skirmisher units as they contain non-skirmishers. So most other lists have a much lower restriction than that on skirmishers per division. But these guys here could basically match that 100%. So let's take a look at what this list actually has and what it does different than a lot of other things. And it's not a very long list either, like some of our more recent ones that we've been reviewing. So it's just basically fewer different choices, but just you'll have lots of the choices you do have essentially. So we start off with medium infantry with spears and shields, typical stat line, typical points, just a solid basic unit, no frills there. We could upgrade all medium infantry to Roman trained heavy infantry, which is an interesting way to go there. That's basically all or none. Okay, and it's for only 3 points. You're basically just getting, again, a bog standard heavy infantry unit with the heavy infantry stat line essentially. So, but for 26 points a pop, that could be interesting. What you might without knowing too much about the list or the army, if you're facing them, you might just expect rather lightly armed to no armor opposition there. Basically, a list that isn't going to stand up to like a tough fight. But here you could actually bring quite a bit of solid, if not spectacular, infantry, just basically without any kind of special rules to go with it. Then we move on to some interesting choices here. So we have light infantry warbands with mixed arms. And basically you could also upgrade them into large units. So, it's a light infantry unit to start with here. So, nothing crazy on the stat line. It does give you a little bit of long range firepower because of, again, that mixed arms description. So a bit of a toolbox unit there, although they are also wild fighters. So puts them in an interesting position there. So typically we tend to see light infantry as small units and fulfilling slightly other roles, but here they're an actual warband with wild fighters. Then we could essentially pay a pretty solid cost there, 8 extra points, but we could upgrade them into a large unit, which then brings them into more of a heavy infantry stat line, except that the armor is not there or the morale save is not there. They're still wild fighters, which is great. But on the other hand, because of that mixed arms rule, that kind of creates a really interesting spot here because, again, we have the sort of heavy infantry combat ability with the 7s on clash and sustain. Again, the morale save is just not there. It's just t-shirt armor essentially, but we get a respectable, like basically full-on ranged stat line to go with that as well. So it's kind of a Swiss Army knife of light infantry here that can actually dish out some damage at range, but also in combat. It's just you're going to be reaching your stamina value here or threshold sooner rather than later due to the weak morale. But that being said, this would be a nice surprise to spring on enemies here because, again, they're going to be expecting you not to have much armor, but they might not be expecting some of the punch that some of these units could deliver. So it's an interesting spot there where you can certainly surprise the opponent and maybe take advantage of some things there. And again, the fact that this is just a rather solid ranged unit at the same time is quite spectacular, honestly. So Then we get into the skirmishers, and you have basically two flavors of those guys here. So you get small units skirmishers with javelins. Again, we've seen that like about 1 million times now, so we know what that is all about. So close range support, basically supporting your other infantry units there, and again adding that extra short range punch with their javelins. But if we did want some more long-ranged ability here, basically we could go with slings or bows. There's no restrictions, unlike a lot of the other lists we've seen. So basically you can go crazy here. And again, you can have as many skirmishers as regular units in your divisions, as we saw above. So, go nuts on that. For 12 points a pop, you get solid long-ranged contribution there. Moving on into the cavalry, we get light cavalry armed with javelins as small units, and about what you expect. So they can do a little bit of work in combat, but that's really, they're again, they can hit a little bit, but they're not going to last. And again, they do have a little bit of close range ability there with the javelins, but they get feigned flight, and that's kind of the standard Numidian cavalry unit, which is again solid. So basically hit and run, and then follow up with the infantry to sort of clean up afterwards, and especially on the warband side as well. So then we could also upgrade that to elite and tough fighters. And, interestingly, there is no restriction here. So it's basically, can you afford to pay 3 extra points, which, seemed like a rather no-brainer type of upgrade. I would want my actual Numidian guys to be as good as possible. So I would find the points to basically make sure I can upgrade all my cavalry to that. So what that does, of course, as it says, stat line doesn't change. So again, you're still a light cavalry unit first and foremost. But feigned flight, elite, and tough fighters is a pretty solid set of special rules there. And again, for just at 22 points, that's pretty solid. So you're going to have a lot of these in quantity still. So definitely worth finding a spot in your list for that. And then we do, if we want to bring a little bit of a more solid punch, and maybe just, if nothing else, throw more dice, we can also have Gallic/Spanish Guard medium cavalry unit. You get one of them. So again, might as well take it just to have that in your general's division. Typical medium stat line there. So solid clash, of course, it drops off afterwards. It is a normal size unit, and they are tough fighters, which you would expect. Again, solid overall, and certainly worth taking. Again, I would like to at least see maybe even like elite in the a general's guard unit, just to sort of complement things there. But again, that's just me. And then last but not least, let's not forget that the Numidians can also bring elephants to the table here. So basically what you would expect from the typical elephant stat line we've seen thus far with javelin armed crews. And surprisingly, somewhat, you still get the leadership 8 across the board here for all your division and commanders in general. So, this would have been one that, if I didn't know anything about the list, I would have maybe guessed like you'd be unfortunately stuck with leadership 7. But this is pretty solid to go around here. So, interestingly, as far as builds go, right. You can certainly do a bit of a combined approach here. You do have to field infantry. That is like the only thing for sure that you have to bring. So you could, go 100% infantry, whereas, a typical image that you might get from Numidians as like allies in other lists that they bring a lot of cavalry, but you could, totally surprise an opponent here and go all in on infantry and really kind of field a solid infantry list with, if you upgrade them all to the Roman trained heavy infantry, again, you're not going to maybe be as good as some of the other heavy infantry units that also bring in some special rules and stuff like that. But, that and all your skirmisher options there could actually be pretty solid. And again, just not what your opponent was expecting. But beyond that, again, like I was saying earlier, you could at least go the sort of the combined route. You got decent infantry options, certainly. You can bring that cavalry unit in, or the cavalry units in, kind of what the list is, or the Numidians are maybe more known for, and then elephants to top it off as well. Or, forget the elephants and just kind of go 50-50 infantry cavalry. So there's a lot of little things you can play around with here. And again, just to mess with the opponent. They might be expecting, again, just a list of nothing but skirmisher type troops that are just going to harass them, a lot of small units and stuff like that. But you can kind of then turn the tables there, and the fact that you have access to some war bands, you could go rather focused on like the medium heavy stuff and go all out on that. You got plenty of skirmishing options, and the fact that you can bring a lot of them per division, that's interesting as well. And you could just go as light as possible as you want on the cavalry side, just to mess with the opponent there, or play that up a little bit and just have too many units for them to possibly deal with, and just kind of bait and kite units into vulnerable positions where your infantry or other things can follow up and deal with it. So an interesting list, certainly, that brings a lot of options to the table, despite not having that many different units or unit types even. There's a lot you can actually do with this Numidian list, which would make it fun to collect, certainly. So, and again, worth doing a little bit of research just to find out more about them. So, and that way you can get some inspiration too on like paint schemes and other hobbying aspects of that. And again, still needs to be said one more time, the fact that you can also throw in elephants into the list is just pretty solid as well too. Even if they're not necessarily going to be a central part of your army, the fact that you can still sort of feel that, and a lot of people will be a lot of opponents will get too focused on seeing the elephants there and kind of maybe disproportionately focus on them as opposed to some of your other things that are really maybe the real threat in your list, or the real danger. That gives you an advantage there. So you can use the elephants, if nothing else, just as a distraction. Like, ooh, here are these big scary elephants coming at you. You better deal with them. So so you can play some mind games there with the opponent as well. But again, a very experienced veteran player is going to know most of your tricks. So. But that being said, everyone still kind of falls for that stuff once in a while. So elephants certainly at least play the psychological role, if nothing else. And an interesting list here, just kind of going over the values again. If you wanted to sort of get the most sort of combined aspects out of everything, so you can take your full 20% of your elephants, maybe take 30% cavalry, and then full like 50% infantry, or you go max out on cavalry and elephants, and then 30% infantry. So you got plenty of room again to play around with your percent values here and feel different things for the opponent, so that they just quite never know exactly what you're going to be bringing, whether it's like all weak and light, not necessarily weak, but lightly armored troops, or more elite heavy infantry type guys. So there's just a lot you can do with it. Anyway, let us know in the comments, guys. Have you played with Numidians as a list here in Hail Caesar? What has your success or lack of success been? If you've played against them, let us know what you think there, or if they've been like allies in any of the other various lists that can incorporate them a little bit as allies. Let us know what you think overall. There are plenty of options available out there for collecting them. I know Warlord does have some in resin now. Certainly, I think most of them are metal, unfortunately. If you want to go that route, of course, that's obviously up to you. Elephants, you could really sort of poach from some of the other factions that have access to the elephant models, and then just kind of more customize it for your Numidian purposes, which is a great modeling opportunity there. That being said, Victrix does also make a lot of these guys in plastic, and some really good plastics there if you just want to go that route. So there's plenty of modeling opportunities there and hobby opportunities. So anyway, guys, hit us up in the comments. I'll be happy to talk with you. Give us a like and a subscribe if you haven't already as well. And thanks again so much for checking us out. Hope you have a good one.